Laptop computer spins onto the screen, opens, and displays ATP Education Program webinar series, closes, and then spins off the screen.
Welcome to today's session on assistive technology supports for students who struggle with processing. Today we are going to talk a lot about the process of processing and switching between things, look at our classroom routines and systems and how we can adjust those to help students who struggle with processing, and also look at some direct tools that will help support students. My name is Cassie Frost. I'm an assistive technology specialist, behavior specialist, problem solver, collector of things that may come in handy, and believer that everyone can learn. My Twitter handle is here on this page, and as always, I will share my email on the last slide. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Before we can talk too much about the tools that can help support processing and switching and students who struggle with those things, it's important first to recognize all of the different things that a student needs to process in a school day. So, one of the very first ones is auditory processing. This is when a student hears a cue and is able to recognize its meaning. Think about all of the times in your day that you give students auditory input or auditory cues. This is everything from lectures or instructions that you give to cues like bells or music playing in the classroom. So when a student hears those things, they need to be able to recognize what it means and what's going to come next. If a student is struggling with this, you may need to look at some additional ways to help give students a chance to process. So that may be things like additional time or providing the cue in a different way, such as a visual cue. Visual cues and visual processing are very similar to auditory, except in this instance, they need to see the cue or the visual or a facial expression, recognize its meaning, and respond accordingly. Oftentimes, if a student is struggling with visual processing, this means that they are going to have a hard time reading signals that the teacher is giving them in a visual manner. This could be anything from a facial expression of a teacher that's trying to tell a student maybe that they need to calm down or stop what they're doing. It may also be that they are going to struggle with facial expressions of their peers. And it may mean that you're going to need to look at some auditory cueing to help supplement. Processing speed. This is how fast you can process, stop one task, and move to another. This is one of the first things that we will notice in schools often when we're starting to realize that students are struggling with processing, because these are the students who have a hard time finishing one task and then moving on. So for example, it may be the student who's always late packing up after the bell rings to leave your class. This is because when they hear the audio cue, it takes longer to process what it means, longer to process through the process of putting things away, getting packed up, and getting to the next class. Sometimes these students then will end up with some behavioral issues or complaints against them because they are tardy for class, or it appears that they are never ready to go. So when we're looking at processing speed, we really want to make sure that students are being allowed enough time to accomplish the things that they need to do. Motor planning is another part of processing. Motor planning is mentally planning what physical steps come next. So in that example of switching classes or moving from one class to another, a student hears the bell, so that's their cue. They have to recognize what it means. Then they have to pack up the materials in front of them. However, they also need to plan out how they are going to get to their locker, how they're going to switch out one set of books for another set of books, the path that they are going to take to the next class, and where they're going to sit when they get there. That's all something that is thought out in your brain, kind of in the back of your brain, without you necessarily even being aware of it before that activity begins. So, motor planning is one of those huge things that occurs without us really ever thinking about it, but a student who's struggling with processing may really be also having an issue in that motor planning area. Another important area of processing is time management. That's that whole process of being aware of time passing, what comes next, how much time you have left, and being able to plan accordingly. All of these things are involved in processing. If a student is struggling with auditory cues, visual cues, processing speed, motor planning, or time management, switching between tasks is going to be very difficult. So let's look at a few things that we can do to help support students. Before we can actually move in to the supporting process, the very first step is figuring out where are the breakdowns, where are things falling apart. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, in a school situation, there are a lot of opportunities for information processing. We have teachers who are teaching in the front of the room. Students need to take in that information, process what it means, get ready for the next thing, and follow those directions. Students need to be aware of time. How much time is passing? How much time is there in between classes? How much time do they have to get their homework done? How much time do they have to get to the bus? They have a schedule that they need to manage. They need to be aware of what class comes next. They need to be aware of when certain projects are due or assignments are due. They also have to process friendships. This can be really difficult because they need to take in audio and visual cues to recognize how their relationships are going with their peers. They need to motor plan the activities that they're going to be doing with their peers, and they need to plan time accordingly to be able to have time to be with friends and still get to class on time. Then underlying all of that are the rules, both the outward spoken rules that are posted on walls and direct taught, and the hidden rules that aren't directly taught, but students are expected to know. School days are incredibly heavy when it comes to processing. So, what can we do to help? One of the first things that we can do to help students who are struggling with processing is to provide visuals. In addition to low-tech visuals, we also have some options for high-tech visuals when it comes to processing. These three tools on our screen are all Chrome extensions. Each one of these can be utilized to create visual instructions, and each of these has a free version that teachers can use. The very first one is a screen recorder called Loom. If I click on the Chrome extension Loom, it's simply going to bring up a small box where I can choose if I want to record my screen or if I want to record myself. Examples of times that you may want to use this is to show a student walk them through the steps of what's going to happen next. This is a really great thing for students who are struggling with motor planning and with the audio cues and visual cues. It helps them be able to see what are all of the next steps and give them time for their brain to recognize what they are. It makes it a little less abstract. I'm going to jump over Nimbus for a second and move to Screencastify. Screencastify is another video recorder. This one has a little bit more involved in it than Loom. So the difference between the two, Loom is going to be a screen recorder that is very simple, very quick to use. The videos automatically save to Loom and it gives you a link. Okay, so kind of like a website link to get students to it. Screencastify works a little bit differently. It also is a very easy to use screen recorder. You can also record the person. I'm actually using Screencastify to record this video. But Screencastify, when it's finished, will automatically save to your Google Drive. So you actually have the video saved somewhere, as opposed to Loom, the video is saved with them and you only get the link to it. Nimbus Screenshot, on the other hand, is a tool that allows you to take screenshots not only of your entire screen, but simply portions of your screen. This works really well for students who need to know what they need to do online or on a computer. It allows you to take pictures of toolbars or buttons that they need to click to really help them plan out what is it they need to do. So for example, if there is a login process to get to your science textbook, for a student who struggles with processing, this may be very difficult because they need to remember what website do they need to go to and which thing do they need to click on first and how do they go through the process. Nimbus Screenshot allows you to take small pictures of the buttons that they need to click on so you can save them all maybe into one document then that the student can look at to be able to follow those steps and processes. As always, when we're talking about any area of executive functioning, we're always going to go back to visuals. I'm kind of a broken record. If you've watched other of these videos in this series on executive functioning, you're going to hear me talking about visuals a lot. With processing, visuals really help students know what's coming next so that they can help prepare for it. So when the bell rings, if a student doesn't know what's coming next, it's going to be a lot harder for them to process the ending of this class and getting ready for the next one. Same thing with processes of routines such as hand washing or lining up. Each of those processes require a student to be able to think through what is going to be coming next and follow through with it. Visuals help provide those extra supports. Now, what if a student is struggling with visual input and visual cues? If that's the case, that a student is struggling with the visual input and visual cues, visuals may not work as well. How do you know the difference? Well, there's really no solid immediate answer for, if a student's struggling more with the visual or the auditory cues. But by observing a student, it can be fairly easy to start noticing which ones they respond best to. As a student gets older, you can also ask them, what works better for you? I see that you're having a hard time wrapping up class and getting on to your next class. How can we help you? Would it help for you to have a list of what you need to get done to wrap up? Would it be better for me to verbally cue you and tell you that class is ending? Okay. In addition to these actual physical things, such as the low-tech and the high-tech tools, another thing that works really well for processing, and I'm actually going to jump back here for just a minute to this screen. Another thing that really helps with processing is, as an educator, being aware. Be very aware of how quickly you are asking students to move from one thing to another and how frequently you're asking for that to happen. So, for example, in addition to attention, there's also the motor planning piece that is involved with processing. So when you ask students to switch from one task to another, they have to take in the cue, they have to recognize it, they have to process and stop one task, move to another, go through the motor planning, be aware of the amount of time that it takes. That's a lot. So, for example, if we give a student an activity, so maybe they are reading a book in class, so it's quiet reading time. If you then interrupt them to ask them to get out their planner and write in a quick note to bring something to school the next day because you just remembered it, and then tell them to go back to reading. For most of us, that wouldn't be that big of a thing. Okay, we're reading a book. The teacher says, okay, guys, everybody put down your book for just a minute. I want you to get out your planner and write in that you need to bring an extra glue bottle tomorrow. Okay, once you're done with that, you can go back to reading. It seems like a very small thing. But for a student who's struggling with processing, that now just took a whole bunch of time and brain power to stop one task, recognize the cue, stop one task, start another task, finish that task, recognize the motor planning of where to put their plan or their book down, how to get out their planner. There's so much there. So I'm going to challenge you as an educator to look at your lesson plans as you move forward and look at how many times you're asking students to start and stop their tasks. And are you giving them ample time and cueing to let them know that that change is going to be happening? If not, try to pick one or two lessons in the next week and see if there's a way that you can slow down the time that students need to switch and move between things, and or if you can give them enough cueing to let them know those transitions are coming. Once you've done that, kind of gauge how well it worked and adjust accordingly. The biggest thing with this is to be aware that it's happening and identify those students who may need additional processing time. If you have any questions, you can always reach me at the email below. As always, I look forward to hearing from you and learning from you. And if there are any other tips or tricks that you have on processing, I always would love to hear them. I hope you join us for other videos in our Executive Functioning series.
Thank you for watching. For more information on the ATP Education Program, please visit our website at atp.nebraska.gov/education or email us at atp.education@nebraska.gov.